Tulsi Gabbard coming out swinging here as only Tulsi can. I want to show you what she was saying there on Fox just last night.
This is where some former FBI agents have actually come out who were serving in the FBI during this period of time and it pointed out exactly that fact, that this line of continuum that they have created here that places a level of suspicion on people. Ultimately, again, the through line here are people who oppose President Biden administration's policies should be seen with some form of suspicion as a potential domestic terror threat. You've talked a lot about, you spoke with Senator Rand Paul about the Quiet Skies program, the secret domestic terror watch list program.
Yes.
Something that the Biden administration placed me on the very day after I spoke out against Vice President Kamala Harris's policies and warned about the potential of the threat that she would pose if she were elected and served as commander-in-chief. So there are many different examples here that go towards exactly what you're talking about, that by laying this groundwork, they are then giving excuse and license to the FBI and other federal agencies to then surveil or carefully watch Americans who oppose the Biden administration's policies.
It's so wild, right? I mean, well, we knew. I mean, this is not earth-shattering, but what is important is that it's all coming out. And so she exposed this, releasing it to the public. This is the Department of National Intelligence releasing it late last night, and basically what we've learned is that they were labeling people DVEs. DVEs, they called people that were possibly threatening the system, right? Because they didn't agree with lockdowns, etc. And so these DVEs, again, terminology as they promoted within the intelligence divisions, were basically some kind of political or social position, political activism. They were using strong rhetoric. They were generalized a philosophic embrace of what the FBI believed could be violent tactics, and therefore deserved to be followed, deserved to be targeted. So, okay. Let's just get this straight. You have a viewpoint that's different, say, than the federal government. Maybe you don't think that we should be having COVID lockdowns. Maybe you don't think that your business should be put out of business. Maybe you don't agree with the Biden administration. Maybe, like me, you had done some reporting, not just on COVID, but also on the Biden laptop. Maybe you shared a story on the Biden laptop. That was enough to put you on the list, so to speak, because their narrative was something else entirely, even though their narrative was not actually true at all, especially if you think about the 51X spooks, right? Brennan was on that list. That it came out with a big, giant piece in Politico nonetheless, which was collecting USAID money on top of it for the subscriptions. You see how it's all so incestuous, ladies and gentlemen? And they said, don't believe any of that. That's just a bunch of garbage. All that Rudy Giuliani and the Russians are trying to sell you about the Hunter Biden laptop, except that it was actually all true. But if you dared to actually speak up and say, hey, maybe this isn't right, maybe this isn't true, then you are part of the problem. You are the domestic violence extremists, the DVE, right? That they then were warranted and justified to go after. So much for freedom of speech, so much for having a different opinion than anyone else. They could just shut you down like that. Game over. And so Tulsi's coming out and she's blowing the lid on all of it. Here's what she was saying. Don't forget about Biden and the entire administration while he was still in office.
The mob that stormed the Capitol on January 6th to try to stop Congress from carrying out its constitutional responsibilities were behaving like domestic enemies of our country. But let's be clear. The John Brennans, Adam Schiffs, were trying to undermine our constitutionally protected rights and turn our country into a police state with KGB-style surveillance are also domestic enemies and much more powerful and therefore dangerous than the mob that stormed the Capitol.
More powerful, more dangerous. You see what she's saying? Because they have a bigger position. And by the way, she's not condoning anything on J6, etc. You know, she's just pointing out that we have a problem with some of the people that were in charge. She continues and actually highlights some of the things that Brennan said.
Now, John Brennan said,
So I know looking forward that the members of the Biden team who have been nominated or have been appointed are now moving in laser-like fashion to try to uncover as much as they can about what looks very similar to insurgency movements that we've seen overseas, where they germinate in different parts of the country and they gain strength, and it brings together an unholy alliance frequently of religious extremists, authoritarians, fascists, bigots, racists, nativists, even libertarians.
Now, President Biden, I call upon you and all members of Congress from both parties to denounce these efforts by the likes of Brennan and others to take away our civil liberties that are endowed to us by our Creator and guaranteed in our Constitution. If you don't stand up to these people now, then our country will be in great peril.
Great peril indeed. Well, here's the good news, guys. She's now Director of National Intelligence. Donald Trump is in power. Letitia James is about to get voted out of New York. And the Democrats have got nothing but, well, AOC front and center as their answer to everything. So, you know, it's funny, like America has a way of like swinging, right? The pendulum goes back and forth. And this is a case where the left took it too far. You know, Joe Biden has said his one regret was that he didn't do enough to police, quote unquote, misinformation. I'm like, are you kidding me, buddy? You didn't do enough? He said this to Susan Page over at USA Today for his final exit interview. And she said, you know, do you have any regrets? And he said, well, my one regret was not actually policing the information enough, that there was too much misinformation out there. Misinformation, oh, I don't know, about stuff like he himself, right? Was this misinformation when we started to say, oh, poor Joe, he looks like he's not quite with it because he's wandering off at G7, just wandering away from the camera because he wants to go check out that parachuter, to the point where Georgia Maloney has to go and gather him. Look at her. She's just fantastic. You know, this is going to hit the Democrats really, really hard. She brings him back to the camera and he's trying to put on his sunglasses and he's moving so freaking slow because he's so old and by then had so much wrong with him. In other words, you don't just suddenly come down with the stage of prostate cancer that Joe Biden came down with. That was something that was years in the making. So you know either the doctors were lying or they were really bad doctors because they're not giving him the proper care that the President of the United States deserves. So yeah, somehow, you know, if you were out there suggesting that maybe Biden wasn't playing with a full deck, you were part of the misinformation. Right, you were part of the cheap fakes that KJP likes to harp on over and over and over again.
Their cheap fakes video, they are done in bad faith, and some of your news organization have been very clear, have stressed that these the right wing critics of the president have a credibility problem because of the fact checkers have repeatedly caught them pushing misinformation.
No. Here's the deal. The guy was suffering, okay? We all know he was suffering. We've seen all the videotapes over and over and over again. You guys didn't want to admit it because you guys had your little puppet in office and you wanted to continue. Anybody who disagreed with you was somehow, let me get it right, a DVE. Deviant. How about we go with that? They were the deviants. I'm not laughing because actually this is really, really serious. And the cover-up of Biden and his health issues, that's massive. The auto pen issue, that's massive. I told you before, I thought it was Jill Biden, Dr. Jill's chief of staff. That was confirmed actually by a member of the DNC just yesterday. When Project Veritas released that tape, we put it on the shorts feed. They caught him undercover saying, David Hobbs, saying that this was actually Burnell, that was the chief of staff to one Dr. Jill Biden that was controlling everything, right? Because she was controlling access to the president. Therefore, you had to get through her. And in order to get through her, you had to go through him. And so he was the scary one kind of running the whole show behind the scenes, probably with a few people like Obama and whoever else along the way. But again, remember, they don't think they did enough to cover up misinformation. And it's like, guys, you were covering up everything, and now it's all coming out, and Tulsi's exposing every single bit of this. So she really is your worst nightmare, right?